I'm the Fan Liaison Officer at Level Playing Field, and I am dyslexic.
My name's Owain Davies, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Level Playing Field, and I'm also dyslexic.
So this week is Dyslexic Week, so myself and Owain thought it might be fun and interesting to discuss our dyslexia and how it's played a part in our lives, in and outside of sport as well. We're both wearing red today. I've got my glorious Nottingham Forest on, and Owain has some kind of Welsh rag. And we're wearing this because the tagline for this week, for Dyslexia Week, is Go Red for Dyslexia. They're doing this because of the dreaded red pen that I'm sure Owain, I definitely did see a lot in my work for grammar mistakes. So that's why we're both wearing red. So I suppose really, Owain, I'm going to kind of throw a question to you then. How was it for you when you saw a red pen in your work and you didn't understand why you were getting that red pen because you thought your work that you put in was actually quite good?
Really difficult, isn't it? You think about dyslexia and the traits that it kind of had. I think a lot of it's about confidence. You as a child, you're taught to challenge, to do things, to try things. But then when you see that red pen and you see those things, somebody saying no, it kind of limits. It limited me. I feel going in. I think I still bear a few of those scars right now about that limiting factor, which is kind of quite challenging, really. I think it's sad that I kind of still feel certain aspects that kind of limit me in that way. But yeah, it's something that I'm kind of focused on wanting to kind of to look at a bit more and how I can address.
Yeah, I mean, for me, whenever I saw the red pen, I was always kind of disappointed that it was just a red pen, and there was never any real follow up. It was kind of like you've done wrong. Okay, I've done wrong, but how can I improve myself? And we're probably going to talk about it in a second, but we both went to two different types of school. And I felt like in my class, the idea of being dyslexic was very much looked down upon. There was no support. I didn't get what I needed. But I'm guessing that was different for you because you went to a school that kind of supported dyslexic people.
Yeah, so my education journey was I was so fortunate for, and it's probably a common story for a lot of people, not everyone, but I was so lucky that parents spotted it early on, coming back from primary school saying he's not an achiever, he's not doing well in school, perhaps maybe he's thick or anything like this, which is that common misconception that a lot of people say. And my parents saw a different side at home, somebody who was very passionate, articulate, wanted to try and wanted to do things, but when it came to school, it was just this massive handbrake, and they fought really hard to for a lot of support and to put a lot of sacrifice in to kind of ensure that I had that support. And at 13, I think it was the time that we made that intervention, and we went to a really small boarding school in North Wales where the focus was on building confidence outside of the classroom. Lessons were only 40 minutes long, maximum of 8 people in a class, one-to-one lessons and picking things up. And it just totally changed. I put it down as such a big defining factor in life about someone believing in you, somebody supporting you, somebody recognizing that your weaknesses don't define you, but it's something to overcome and to challenge. And I'm hugely passionate about my dyslexia. It does have a lot of baggage, don't get me wrong, but I'm passionate about it and want to kind of to keep on evolving. And I suppose your education story is a little bit different to mine. What's your kind of background?
So mine was, I went to a very big school. It was like hundreds of pupils in a class. We had about 30 pupils in one class. And for me, it was trying to raise my voice in a class of a lot of other students. And I think the way that my school worked was it was support the people who had the ability to naturally be able to exceed in what would be a traditional setting of grammar, maths, science. And then everyone else who may struggled, they would put, as they termed it back then, a remedial class, whereabouts I was learning my at, but, cut, the, F, all those kind of phonetic sounding letters when I was 13, 14, 15, and I was way above that. I knew my ABCs. I didn't need that support. What I needed was someone to sit down with me and kind of really play out what I wasn't doing right, and kind of support me in how I can do things better with my dyslexia. So for me, I went through school thinking I was a bit dumb, a bit slow. And it wasn't until I went to college and university whereabouts I was actually diagnosed with dyslexia. And all of a sudden, it was kind of like someone had opened this whole new world to me, because it sounds weird, but the fact that I just had a reasoning for the way that I learn made me feel a lot more self-assured in myself, gave me so much more confidence. And you kind of touched on confidence. I think it's a huge part of dyslexia, that yes, you're dyslexic, but if someone's continually putting you down and making you feel like you're stupid, or you're not at the level where actually you can compete academically, just because they see academics as something completely different from me, it makes you feel less than. And that plays a part in your confidence in when you're writing, or when you're trying to pitch something, or even when going into work. So from going to university, I realized that my dyslexia, yes, like you said, it comes with baggage, but it also made me think in a completely different way. And when I'm writing and whenever I'm doing work, so I kind of leaned on my creative side, which I think is kind of like a trope for a lot of dyslexic people. Everyone's like, oh, they're dyslexic, you're creative. I don't think that's the case. Like, most dyslexics are different in different ways. But for me, it was the case. So I get to write stories, I think. I mean, in my role at Level Playing Field, I write articles and stories about what we do. I think the way that I write, my writing style comes from my dyslexia, because I'm trying to tell a story with so much detail, because that's how my mind works. I want people to kind of jump into it. So, I mean, so for you then, Owain, I know you've worked in sport pretty much most of your adult life. You've worked with young people who have autism. How was that for you, like seeing you working with your own disability and then supporting other people with a disability that I suppose can have some similarity, where people get confused with what dyslexia and what autism is?
It's the irony of a lot of this is that I always wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up, and I think it was my dyslexia and still not being able to pass my GCSE English, which is still a little bugbear. And I think perhaps one in my life I'd like to kind of to tackle that, just to kind of kick those demons to the curb. But I think I think there's a certain amount of, when you look at challenges and you look at, some things that you kind of go through personally in dyslexia, on the outside, on the outset, that you might kind of think that there's the challenge isn't too difficult, or whatever it is. But like you say, confidence is a big thing, and being able to try new things. But the journey of kind of getting to certain points and just doing certain things, it drives a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding about how people kind of face challenges. And I think that's a big thing that we have facing, is around how do we address challenges? How do we look at certain ways to kind of do it? And I use that as a kind of a bit of a focus to kind of understand people a lot more, and looking at ways that, dealing with an individual, not necessarily as a group of people, and thinking about how can I empower one individual to make a difference, or be engaged, or to be supported, or anything like that. And I think it really helped on that way. It wasn't a case that I knew a huge amount about autism, but I was willing to be open to an individual and to recognize what would support them from their feedback. And I think that was really powerful. And I think when I look back, it's something that, that's when I've benefited most. And hearing about your journey through it, Liam, is like hearing about what helps me, what makes me tick, what's going to support me. If I go back to school and talking about, let's write, let's do an English, essay about Jane Austen, or Standard of Mice and Men, or something like that, which is there. That's really difficult, because I don't have that confidence, that buy-in for it. But you get me to talk about sport, or about rugby, or something I'm passionate about, then I would obviously work a lot harder and perhaps be a bit more successful in it. So I think that's that's the kind of the few takeaways that I've kind of had, and how I've kind of maybe used my journey to be able to kind of impact what my passion is going forward in helping other people.
So what do you think then that kind of a big misconception is for people with dyslexia? Because my personal opinion, I still believe that dyslexia is such a taboo subject matter, especially within the workplace, that if you're dyslexic, I fear that if I bring that up, people think less than of me. But I don't know if that's because of my own relationship and journey with dyslexia.
I definitely see that. I think if you look about school, workplace or anything like that, the misconception I think is that initially that you're thick, isn't it? The standard measuring stick of what intellect looks like is how can you spell an 8-letter word? Do you know what a full stop or a comma is, or in my terms, it's more of a speed bump than anything else when it comes to my writing. And I think that's kind of the measuring stick of what success is like in the wider society, or certainly in the past, it's probably changed a lot now. Whereas when you look at intellect, a bit further about how people, adapt, you look at people's strengths, and and you look about how they can positively impact the environment that they're in, whether it's in work, whether it's in social groups, in family groups, and looking at those particular strengths to benefit the people around them and what they're trying to achieve. And I think that's a really big point that we need to kind of to get across about the misconception, is that not all dyslexic people are thick, or from there. This is what I see it as is that people just do things in a very different way, and I think we just have to be flexible in being able to achieve that. If I look at I've been so fortunate for every organization I've worked in that they've been so understanding, but also really recognize my strengths. And that's something that I really wanted to do, as I've kind of gone through, work, and when I've had positions of leadership, is to understand other people's strengths. Like I see your strengths, Liam, in our organization about, be your creativity, your innovation, your ability to kind of to bring people together. And I think that's so powerful and something to harness. And that's what we want to do. But we all undoubtedly with dyslexia will have, maybe an area in which we need a bit of support on. And luckily in our team, we have that, spelling and grammar is something that, we both, use our team to be able to kind of to do that. And probably for releasing a press release is not going to, we're not going to have the final sign off on that. But I think that's the thing. But from your point of view, what's your misconception that you've kind of faced quite a lot of?
My misconception is the fact that, kind of like yourself, like I went into an industry before I joined Level Playing Field, whereabouts they would look at you and go, well, if you can't spell, what are you doing here? Like I wanted to create documentaries, so I went to the BBC and I had my success creating radio documentaries, but a lot of that is pitching ideas. And I was fortunate that I found an organization, an independent company, who kind of nursed my dyslexia. But before that, I had so many people knocking me back just because I couldn't spell the title of the documentary that I wanted to create. Like I had the pictures already. Like I had the ideas of how to create this documentary. And then just because I can't put it down on paper, people saw that as a negative. Whereas I would go, well, no, actually, if you can supply the tools to help me, we can create something that's actually going to be really good. Just because you've seen that the fact that I can't spell sometimes dyslexia, like that shouldn't be a negative against me. I know what dyslexia is. I understand what dyslexia is. Just because I can't put it down on paper, why is that the be all and end all? And that's whereabouts I think, for me personally, I've had a lot of knockbacks, and I'm going to presume a lot of people who might be watching this might also have had the same. I think too much is put on grammar. Just because you can't spell something doesn't mean that you don't understand it. And I think as a mindset, that's something that we need to step away for as a society, and not put so much emphasis on it. Because once you start school, you're instantly graded by how you can spell something. And I think that's ridiculous, because you're automatically thinking you are less than just because you can't spell that 3-letter word or 4-letter word straight away. Well, no, they understand the words, they just don't know how to spell it. Help them spell it, and then we can come about and, like, I think as a country or as a world, there's so many people getting left behind just because they can't spell a certain word, and to me that's ridiculous. But yeah, that's kind of where I fall. So, I mean, let's kind of start wrapping this up now, because obviously dyslexia is such a deep issue, and I feel we could talk about it for hours, but we want to keep it short because of social media. So for you then, Owain, how would you like to see this week of Dyslexia Week played out? I mean, what lessons would you like people to take away from maybe this conversation or throughout the week?
I think the big thing, there's 2 points to it. From a wider perspective, I think it's just understanding, isn't it? I think, create an environment where somebody can flourish, that you can really understand it. And I think you like you said, there's loads of people, thousands, millions perhaps of people who are, who might struggle or challenge. And actually, kind of within that, they might kind of keep it in themselves, and may not kind of look to strive, or they might be having inner challenges and inner demons. Whereas if you have an environment where you can actually be open and honest about your dyslexia in work, and then you can actually kind of progress, you can put plans in place, and then you feel supported and you can achieve. And I think one of the big things that I've been kind of going through lately is about self-belief and self-worth. And I think, like, really reflecting on that quite a bit. And I think, it comes down to this dyslexia and perhaps the red pen scenario from an early age, where I perhaps not felt good enough in doing certain things and not pushed myself, hard enough, where a lot of the time other people believe in my ability a lot more than maybe I believe in my ability. And that's something I really want to, I'm excited about looking at in a lot more detail, about looking, how can I readdress that? How can I, balance that up? And just to think about, my dyslexia is a significant part of my life. It has been for a long time. I'm massively passionate about it. We talk about it openly in work and whatnot. And I think it's something that I just want to kind of not use it as a limiter, but see it as something that, I can harness and I can drive, and I can actually kind of achieve more goals and achieve, my ceiling isn't limited too low. It's actually kind of, blow the lid off, and whatever I want to achieve can be achieved. And that's something I'm really excited about. And I think, it's quite cathartic just talking about it. We've had, passionate discussions about it. And I think that's a really important side of it. So, the wider thing, I want more understanding. People just to understand it, create environments where people can flourish, they can do their thing, they can drive, they can be successful and contribute to the big goals that whatever they're involved in. And then from a personal perspective, I just really want to really explore that self-confidence piece, that self-worth piece around how I can be a bit more a bit more understanding of that, and how I can really overcome it. But I'm really excited about it. What about you though? What are you hoping this week? And then I suppose from your perspective with dyslexia.
I think it is just that, it's having that conversation. I like the idea of maybe two people who are dyslexic just talking about the dyslexia, because I think it's something that as dyslexics, we hide behind it. And for me, I've gone kind of like yourself, over the past couple of years, I've gone through a journey of really being angry at my dyslexia because I felt like it's held me back. And then I've been fortunate whereabouts I found myself in a position whereabouts I've had some stability, and now I can really look into my dyslexia and go, well, yes, like, you are a chain around my neck, but you're a chain that makes me so unique to everyone else that I can harness that and be better than, to a certain point. And that's something that I need to kind of continue to learn from, and talk about my dyslexia and understand other people's dyslexia as well, because we're all completely different. And so yeah, just having that conversation. And also, I think for people who might be watching this who aren't dyslexic, don't be afraid to also speak to a person who's dyslexic and get an understanding of their dyslexia. And because that way you can grow as well, and support your colleague or your friend who has dyslexia, and having that understanding. And I think that's really beneficial to everyone, really, not just dyslexic people. We're going to wrap this up now, but I would like to say Level Playing Field will be posting some stuff online throughout the week, so make sure you continue that discussion if you want to. Also, go to goredfordyslexia.com to find out a little bit more about the work that the dyslexic community are doing throughout this week. Thank you, Owain, for chatting to me about dyslexia.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, I'm sure we'll do something like this maybe next year or maybe sooner. Thank you very much.
Perfect.